Welcome to ChurchTalks podcast. It's amazing to have you here. Today we have a very special guest. We've been waiting a while to have this guy over here. Everyone who comes on our podcast talks about him. He's not old, but he is the longest term minister in the Gold Coast. Perhaps that's the case. Lots of experience, lots to talk about. We can go in any direction with this conversation. It's going to be, I reckon it's going to be amazing to anyone who's listening, either they are churchgoer, non-churchgoer, or church leader. So it's a pleasure to have you here with us too. Thank you so much for making time to be here. It's amazing.
It is a real privilege, and thank you for your really kind words. I've been on the Gold Coast for 12 years, so I'm not the oldest or longest, but yeah, it's been a real privilege to be here for 12 years.
It feels like it because everyone talks about you.
Yeah.
Everyone that's been in this podcast is like, you gotta have Stuart Perry here. It's likely that you have a wide wisdom into ministry. You're in a traditional church, which my understanding is, especially here in Australia, the Anglicans were really strong as church started to spread over Australia. So I'm curious to talk about all of that. But let's start from the beginning, because we never had a chance to have a conversation. So this is your introduction to me and to everybody else. Like, who is Stuart Perry?
Who is Stuart Perry? Big question. I'll give you the sort of the theological. Stuart Perry is not enough, but he knows that God is. And I try to frame everything that I do based on the reality that I'm not enough. And everything that happens that I steward is because of what God does and not by what I do. But my journey to that realization's been long and winding. I'm 53. I know I don't look like I'm 53, but 53 years old. Grew up as a cradle Anglican, baptised in the Anglican Church. My parents were Anglican. My dad, first-ish generation Anglican. My mum grew up in a religious family. Dad took himself off to church when he was 10 years old and really committed to the church and felt a strong calling to ministry about 12. 12.
Wow.
He waited till he was in his 40s though, before he went into theological college. I don't remember a time when I wasn't regularly going to church. I stood up at a Billy Graham crusade when I was 8 years old and publicly gave my life to Jesus, but Jesus has always been part of my story. But I've had sort of times in my life where I felt closer to Jesus, times when I've felt like I've wandered away. But really, up until probably sort of 19-ish, I sort of had an inherited faith. I was mostly a good kid, nerdy kid, good at school, and also really sporty. I loved sport. But because my parents moved around a lot, being a priest in the Anglican Church, 8 years old when Dad went to theological college, and then when you're sort of a new priest, you often will get moved around a lot. Finished high school on the mid-north coast, and then went back to Newcastle for university. I had a real strong realisation of purpose and calling when I was 12 as well, to be an accountant.
To be an accountant?
To be an accountant. And
hold up. You had a realization of purpose to be an accountant. How does that work?
Yeah, well, I was going to a private school. Anglican priests don't get paid a whole lot of money. Most pastors don't.
Amen.
And my grandparents were really blessed us by paying for that private education for a couple of years. And I think the way it worked was all around me were a whole group of mates whose parents were accountants. I thought, well, they must be able to earn a fair amount of money. But I didn't want to be an accountant to be an accountant. I wanted to be an accountant to run corporations and businesses.
Wow.
To be a general manager or a CEO. And so, I finished uni and got my degree in commerce and started work as an accountant and worked in a motor vehicle dealership as my first job. And it was probably my last year of uni, sort of my life sort of changed significantly. I met my wife at a Christian camp a few years earlier, and she agreed to go out with me. She kind of made the harder move on me. I was probably a little nervous. She's my first proper girlfriend. And,
wow.
Leanne's an amazing woman of God, but an amazing woman, just full stop. And been super supportive. So worked in a manufacturing company after the motor vehicle dealership. And then I got a job working for the Salvos as their head of finance.
Wow.
And was there for about 4 years. And then I moved to another not-for-profit in the disability and child fostering space. Head of finance, bigger role, more scope, a national organisation. All along, I was involved with the life of the church, involved in music ministry, was in a Christian band, thought for a while that I'd be a Christian rock star. I didn't have the commitment. I wasn't good enough. We had lots of fun. We were sort of big in the Anglican Church for a little while, but that's not very big. We released
big on the Anglican Church is an oxymoron in itself.
Right. We released a CD, and within 12 months the band broke up. So we went back to being a worship leader in my local church. And at this stage, we had our first child, Annika, who's now 23, and I sat in my backyard in suburban Newcastle with my wife on the house that we were never going to sell because both of us moved around a lot as kids. And I was thinking about sort of this role that I was in, exponential growth, and the finance and admin side of it just wasn't keeping up. I was working extraordinary hours. And I sort of sat with my wife and said, like, I think I'm almost done with this job. It'd been somewhere between 12 and 18 months I'd been there, and I just could see that it wasn't going to be a good fit for me. She looked at me and she said, look, what do you want to do? Do you want another role? Do you want to do something different? So I know you've always felt like you're called to be running companies. And I said, I just can't get this idea of being in full-time ministry out of my head.
Wow.
And she looked at me and she said, I knew it.
I knew it.
Months earlier, our church had gone on a retreat. And I've always felt like, since I've been exploring the Holy Spirit as a young adult, that I'd had the gift of discernment. And at the end of this church retreat, the guest speaker went around the room and prophesied over everyone. I know that's a bit radical for Anglicans to do, to prophesy, but he was a Baptist, so that was okay. This Baptist guy prophesied over us all.
Forgive our cousin.
That's right. And as he's going around the room, I'm sort of going, oh yeah, I reckon he's on the money with that.
Yeah.
And he got to my wife and said, you always worry about having the right words to say. You don't need to worry about the right words because Stuart's got more than enough words for both of you. And God is just calling you to accompany people and be alongside people. And that was just perfect for my wife. We weren't sitting together. He got to me sort of towards the end and he said, Stuart, within you's a deep well that's not yet tapped, and once it's tapped, it will bear much fruit. And I thought to myself, well, he's got me completely wrong. At that point in my life, I was working ridiculous hours at work, and all my spare time was devoted to the church. I was leading worship teams. We'd congregation planted in our local church. I was part of the sort of the leadership team, volunteer leadership team. I've been preaching since my early 20s. I was on committees and groups for the Anglican Church. I just thought to myself, I couldn't do any more. There's no well to tap. It's already fully tapped. But from that moment, that sort of little stirring full-time ministry, I just couldn't get it out of my head. And sort of probably about 4 or 5 months later, we were in the backyard. And God being so gracious, I left that job and I got a job running a financial planning and accounting firm. So God gave me the desire of my heart, the fleshly desire. And all the time I was in that role, I was thinking, I can do this. I'm good at it, but it's not what I'm meant to do long term. And then found my way into Bible college, theological college in the Hunter Valley. I was the last student to go through from beginning to end in the same theological college my dad studied at. So I was there as a child at 8 and there as a dad in his 30s with
That's a great story.
one small child at the time. I joke that it's sort of like the movie The Highlander. There could be only one. I was the one at the end. First church in Newcastle, right in the centre of Newcastle. Oldest church building in Newcastle. This church risked all their savings to bring me in as an assistant associate and to grow the church, to plant congregations.
So that was your first role as a full-time minister?
Yeah.
An assistant. So did they still have a lead pastor there?
Yes,
a lead minister, you call it?
Yeah, a rector, a priest in charge. Okay. So it's I don't love the word rector. I am one at Rabina, but it's from the Latin to rule, and that doesn't sort of sit in my spirit really well. But it's the official title that you have in some parts of the Anglican Church for people who oversee the parish.
So you were brought in to help him?
Yeah.
And then you slowly took over?
Within 2 years, he left and moved on to another role. And in the church's wisdom and the bishop's wisdom, or I'd say lack of it, they appointed me to stay on and run the church, which I've since discovered rarely happens in the Anglican Church. And we were there for 7 years. And then,
why do you say rarely happens?
Normally the process in the Anglican Church is that you basically do your apprenticeship or your traineeship in one church, and then they move you to another church.
Oh, okay.
And generally it's a smaller church, and that church was growing quickly. It was a small church, but it was growing quickly in terms of Anglican church growth, not in terms of church growth of what I see around me on the Gold Coast or other independent churches. But we had exponential growth. I think there was about 40 people when the guy who was my boss started. It grew to about 120 when I started, and it had grown to over 200 when I left.
Nice.
So I mean that we'd be, and it's sad to say, but that was the biggest church in the Newcastle region at that time in the Anglican denomination. So it was. It's a story that of that sort of faith and trust in God of a community to risk everything for the future that I've really held on to in my ministry.
I would love, if you can, obviously, I'm not even sure if you would say you're the best person for that purpose, but I think you would be. I would love for you to give us a very brief history of the Anglicans. How did it all happen in Australia? Because from what I hear, 10 years ago, I spent some time in Sydney, went to Melbourne, all in research, like trying to research what church planting looks like. And all I heard was Anglicans, Anglicans. And we don't have to go politics, and we don't have to talk about agendas. But from that time, and fast forward to today, apparently there was an identity crisis within the Anglican Church where there was a division.
Yep.
Some went to the left politically, some stayed conservative. And like I said, we don't have to cover that. But from your perspective, give us a little bit of a history of how church planting was so powerful that everything that was talked about from the south of New South Wales all the way to Queensland was Anglican.
Yeah, I mean, the history of the Anglican Church starts in England in the Reformation, when a lot of people say Henry VIII started the Church of England because he wanted to get divorced. I mean, that's part of the story, but the Reformation would have happened in England regardless of what happened in Henry VIII's bedrooms. The move of God in the Reformation was powerful in England as well as it was in Europe with Luther and Calvin. By the time we get to colonising Australia, the church that came with the First Fleet was the Church of the State in England, which was the Church of England, the Anglican Church. Certainly there was Catholics as part of it. There's never been a traditional Church of the State in Australia, but the Anglicans and the Catholics, I guess, they got there first. Yeah. And so you'll find all over Australia, typically in the centre of town is an Anglican church, and on the top of the hill there's a Catholic church. And there's been various moves of God throughout the history of Australia where there's been seasons of church planting. And the Anglican Church has sort of gone a little stale on that, and we can probably talk about that later on and our role in that at Robina. But certainly in the settlement of Australia, the Newcastle diocese where I was ordained a priest actually started at the Hawkesbury River north of Sydney and continued up to North Queensland. So the first bishop in this area was actually from Newcastle, a guy called Bishop Tyrrell. If you like your wine, you might have heard of Tyrrell's Wines. It's named after his family.
Wow.
And basically used to stories of him jumping on horseback and pilgrimages for days, weeks, months, riding all over the countryside, pastoring the pastors and growing churches, planting churches all over north of Sydney. There was certainly a theological divide that was happening in that time in church history, which sort of split the more conservative part of the Anglican Church with the more traditional. There's a movement called the Oxford Movement that happened, which sort of reclaimed some of the traditions of the Anglican Church that were originally thrown out at the start of the Reformation with Queen Elizabeth. Mary Queen of Scots tried to bring some Catholic stuff back in. Queen Elizabeth first sort of brought back the Protestant side of it, and then years later, the Oxford movement started to reclaim some of the beauty and aesthetic tradition. The stained glass windows and the sacraments started to elevate. And so I guess I'm a bit of a product personally of the mishmash of the Anglican Church. I love the Bible. I love Jesus. I believe the Bible is the Word of God. But I also love the traditions of the church when they're explained and they've got richness and depth. I love celebrating Holy Communion and using the words that have been passed down from the disciples, from Jesus. And the words of Jesus were used by the disciples, used by the early church, that found its way into the Catholic Church's prayer book, which found its way into the Anglican Church's prayer book. And so we're using words that have been passed down from the early church. When people understand the depth of that, I think they can catch some of the work of God throughout generations. And it's not just something that we've invented in the last 10 years.
Yeah.
I love the depth of our church. The Anglican Church is a messed up church, my friend, like all churches, but we've got political infighting all over the place, people who call each other names. And I guess it's why I love church unity, is that where I find my biggest supporters are pastors from other denominations. It's not that people talk badly in my own denomination, but I get so much love and support from church leaders from other churches, which
What's
is really
your hope for the Anglican Church? Do you think the
Yeah.
Anglican Church is at its end, or?
Yeah, it's a really good question. My dad actually challenged me when I told him that I felt called to become a priest, which surprised him. He always thought my sister would be the one that would become a priest. She always used to say as a kid that she was going to be the first female priest. By the time she was an adult, there was already female priests in the Anglican Church. Dad actually said, are you sure the Anglican Church? Are you sure that going to the theological college that I went to is the right thing for you? But I've always had a sense that God hasn't called me out of the Anglican Church. That's how I was raised and where I was formed. It's where I met my wife. It's where I formed friendships and had God speak into my identity. But there was also another prophecy as I was going into theological college, and it was really clunky. The words weren't right, but a person in our church handed me a slip of paper the week after we announced that I was going to theological college, and on it, and I've still got the piece of paper at home, It says, you will influence the Anglican Diocese of Australia. There is no Anglican Diocese of Australia. And I've always interpreted that prophecy as my role is to raise up the next generations. I think our denomination, and I would say this of other denominations, we thought we were the church of the culture. We've got the church buildings in the centre of every township, and we thought we were the chaplains. Like, you come to us if you want to get married, if you want to get kids baptised, if you want to have a funeral, if you want to get your first job, you better be in an Anglican church so that you get to know people. But by the 50s, all of that had sort of drifted away. And then you throw into that all the church abuse that's happened across the churches, but particularly in our denomination. I believe that we've lost the right to tell the world outside the church how they should live their lives. And so we have to rebuild our credibility. And I also believe that God is sovereign and God will be God. And if the Anglican Church isn't there, the rocks will still cry out. God will be known, Christ will be glorified. But I do think there's something about the Anglican Church that if it is not present, the wider body of the church is lesser.
Well, absolutely. It's a piece of the tradition we'll miss out on.
And I guess I feel my calling is to rattle the cages of our institution and say, just because we've always done it this way, does that mean that we have to do it the same way into the future? And what do we hold on to and what do we let go? If the tradition has deep meaning, then let's reinterpret it and represent it to a new generation. But if it's become empty ritual, let's spit it out. Let's not hold on to it. So I guess I'm a little bit of a troublemaker in my denomination in that sense.
Talking about those changes and being a troublemaker, you're in Robina.
Yeah.
This is the center of the Gold Coast.
Yeah.
A city that is known by the culture of the body, where traditional and conservative values have gone down the drain.
Yeah.
How have you found room to sustain your conservative beliefs in your church amidst the whole, I'll use the same word you used, the whole mess that the church has found itself in?
Yeah, I think people joke in the same way they used to joke before I became a priest. When are you going to become a priest? And I would say, never. I know what they earn. I'm not going to ever do it. And God was chuckling. I've got plans. People will often say, when are you going to be a bishop, Stewart? Not a chance. I would be the worst bishop. I've been in the corporate world and I've climbed the corporate ladder. I don't need to climb the church ladder. I've always felt strongly called to the local church. I think the local church is the place where you can actually build deep connections, authentic relationships. And regardless of what the health of your denomination or churches that are connected to you are, if your local church is not healthy, then you've really lost the mission. So I think I've stayed focused by focusing on the health of the local church. I appreciate the breadth of our denomination. I appreciate that people will have a different interpretation of different parts of the Bible than I have. I think my education has given me an appreciation. Just because you might have a different view of human sexuality than I do, I'm not going to say you're not a Christian. But I do have an orthodox or conservative view of human sexuality. I don't shy away from that. But it doesn't mean that we're not going to welcome people who've got different perspectives on that. Got lots of people in our church who've got gay kids or gay relatives. We've had gay people as part of our church. I'm sure we do now. I don't change my sermons for any of that. It is a big rift in our denomination at the moment. But at the moment, I'm really encouraged that my superiors, my bishops, are really encouraging of what we're doing at Robina. And and working alongside other churches. We're collaborating and building a network church, starting with Burleigh and Palm Beach.
Yeah.
And they're just cheering that on.
In saying that, Queensland seems to be the state where you have the most support. Everything else around the country seems to be going the other way around. And
yeah, I don't know about that. I think, Sydney's always been the sort of the poster child of conservative Anglicanism, but there's not a lot of charismatic evangelicals in the Sydney diocese. The Melbourne diocese just appointed Bishop Rick Thorpe as the Archbishop. He was the church planting bishop in London.
Yeah.
Came out of Holy Trinity Brompton, the Alpha home base.
A lot of people are excited with his coming to Melbourne.
And we've been saying there's an Anglican Church in Toowoomba that we work closely with. They're doing church planting. They're a little bit ahead of us. And we often say, if you want to be involved in church renewal, revival, planting that's got momentum, go to Melbourne. But if you want to be in ground zero, come to Southeast Queensland, because we're at ground zero. We're starting from scratch.
Okay.
We're building on some solid foundations, but in other ways, it's sort of a knock-down rebuild type situation.
There's a guy down in Melbourne that I like a lot, and he was very influential in my early journey, called Guy Mason.
Oh, yeah.
I think he tried to not look like an Anglican for a while.
That's right.
And
Yep.
finally gave up.
Indeed.
So shout out to Guy.
Yep.
And I studied a lot of what he did.
Yeah.
Like 10 years ago before I went to Brazil.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think if I get my story right, he started in a church in a pub, in a brewery in Docklands in Melbourne.
Yeah.
And they've done what they've done in City on a Hill has been amazing. But I don't think we can just leave it to City on a Hill to do it.
Yeah.
More churches. Yeah. There's more people not going to church all around Australia, but particularly on the Gold Coast, for all of our churches to be full, and more room for church planting.
Well, let's talk about church planting. Let's nerdy this thing out. Okay, church planting from your perspective. What is it? How do you do it? How many churches do you think we need? What's the ideal number in the church?
Yeah, I don't think you can have too many churches. I passionately believe that we should be cheering each other on. We are not in competition.
Amen.
I say that both as my brothers and sisters leading Anglican churches. I'm not in competition with you, but also brothers and sisters from other churches, other denominations, independent churches. We are not in competition. We are better when we speak well of each other.
Nice.
And we are better when we express the diversity of the people of God. The people that come to my church, or God's church in the Anglican context, God's entrusted their discipleship and their formation to me. And if I think that they're not getting fed or led, then I'll be the first person to cheer them on to find another church. My heart breaks when people leave the church and don't go to another church. If people leave my church and go somewhere else, there's a bit of pride, I think, that gets hurt there, but hallelujah, they're in a community. Church planting in an Anglican context really is, other than some outliers like City on a Hill in Melbourne, other than sort of rogue operators in other parts of Australia, it probably lost momentum in the 60s and 70s. And it's been since then that there's not a lot that's happened. And then we've just had rapid decline. I think we sort of tussle with the Uniting Church about which church is going to decline the fastest. So Mike Hands and I sort of sometimes compare notes. Like, your denomination's not sliding as fast as ours. No, our denomination's sliding faster than yours. But we both, I think, sensed God's calling to be within the system, to change it, not to exit the system. And so one of the exciting things for us as we start to look at ground zero of church planting is using the opportunities where we've got buildings that are used maybe 10% of the week. And we've got an amazing community in Palm Beach, faithful, God-loving, God-expressing, Christ-centric community, there's 30 to 40 of them on a Sunday. We believe that our calling as a church at Robina is to come alongside them and not strip away all that they love, but to do something new alongside in that space, to speak to another generation in a different way. And so church planting, in one sense, could look like coming alongside a more traditional congregation and doing something new. But at the same time, what I'm finding is that some young people want tradition. I've been blown away by, like 2 weeks ago, we had a young girl in year 9 be dropped off by her parents to our 7:30 a.m. traditional service. Like 7:30 a.m. is stupid o'clock to go to church. Mostly only older people go to that, and my wife. We've got some younger people who do come, but like, it's a big commitment to get out of bed on a Sunday morning and go to church. She sat in that congregation, and a beautiful retired school principal came and sat with her.
Wow.
And she experienced church for the very first time. Never been in a church her entire life. Walked into a church, and she picked a traditional. That same service, 2 Bond Uni students walked into church. It's that same service. It would be easy for us to say, hey, just come later in the day. We've got a more informal service. We've got more modern music. Come to that. There's young people there. But they started in that traditional service. So for us to say that type of church is dead or not relevant, we're starting to see people be attracted to that type of church. On the Gold Coast, there's a lot of young people who don't have grandparents. We've got grandparents for those those kids. And many of their stories involves their own grandchildren walking away from the church because their own kids walked away. And their and it's exciting for them to know, actually there's kids my grandchildren's age that are coming to church. And so it causes them to start to pray for their kids again and their grandkids again.
I know exactly how that feels. We have adopted grandparents in our church for our kids exactly for that reason.
So in church planning in that sense could look like revitalisation work, but there's also we've got great Anglican schools on the Gold Coast, coming alongside Anglican schools and leading families into relationship with a church community. What happened, I think, during COVID was a lot of people in a lot of churches, in the same way there is a lot of religion of the body on the Gold Coast. We are a little bit of a Bible Belt. There's some amazing Christian schools. But you cannot convince me that sending your child to a Christian school is enough. Connecting them to the body of Christ is what's going to form them in their faith. And so there's been a lot of families that have disconnected from church since COVID. And Nippers is massive, AFL, sport, brunch. But finding a pathway back to the local church is what we want to do for people going to Anglican schools. So we do see that as part of our church planting mission, but also we're very open to finding a building in the middle of nowhere or a lounge room somewhere.
How strong would you say is your pipeline, from your local context in Robina? How strong is the pipeline for the next church planters? How do you prepare them?
We're ground zero. We're ground zero. So we're starting that pipeline now. So we're hoping that within next couple of years we will have started the revitalisation work in Palm Beach, and Burleigh Heads, and in Anglican schools. So we've had interns for 10 years, but we're stepping up our internship program, starting to look at our young adults that are already in our church and training them in informal and formal ways. But at the moment, I'm sort of feeding myself with how other churches and how other denominations are doing it, so I can learn from them.
Looking at Melbourne, because you said Melbourne's a bit ahead, and what we have here. Once you find that guy on the pipeline, how does it work? What is it involved other than the theological training? How does the church get involved? Does it get funded? Does it go to an old building? Does it start something from the scratch?
I mean, we do have an advantage where we don't have to find a building to rent. So we can come alongside a church like Palm Beach and say, we're going to do your morning service, but we're going to do another service at another time in the day on Sunday, or maybe another day of the week. So we don't have to find space. But we do actually have to train people, and we have to train them practically and theologically. In our denomination, we can't offer Holy Communion unless we're ordained. So the sacramental part of our ministry has to be done by an ordained person. So that is probably a 3+ year process to get to that point. But there's no reason why we can't raise up young people to lead in non-Holy Communion services, to lead youth groups, young adults groups, Bible studies. So that's where we're starting. We've brought out a young priest who's 31 from the UK who was part of the Saint Network in East London, which is sort of like a parallel church to Holy Trinity Brompton, multi-site, rapid growth, revival. So he's been breathing in that ecosystem for the last 11 years and helping us to reimagine our ecosystem.
Nice.
So yeah, we've got a lot of work to do. It's going to be messy, but we believe God's put it on us as a church. I mean, I could look at it like, I'm 53. There's enough people coming to church to provide my income until I retire, but that would rip my soul out. God's put it on my heart from the very beginning to be part of the answer to whether the Anglican Church has a place for the future. And I don't believe that I'm any type of spokesperson, but I do believe I have the discernment and the gifting to come alongside a young person and say, God's got something for you, and to push them forward.
Yeah, their one-on-one mentorship is crucial.
And I can be there in the background cheering them on.
Do you have a time frame for that?
Yeah. We're going pretty quick, so we're starting to gear up to do that in 2026. Into 2027, we'd like to think that we've planted or revitalised 3 churches.
3 churches?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Do you think that the Anglican Church, and you don't have to answer this if you don't want to.
No.
But do you think the Anglican Church is open to offer those buildings to other denominations if they are ready before the Anglican churches?
That's tricky because because we are who we are, we're an institutional church which has got lots of rules and restrictions. The automatic answer I would give you is no, they're not open, but there's always a but. Because our buildings are consecrated, they're set apart as buildings for worship. They're consecrated for Anglican worship. So I've had plenty of unity events in our church at Robina. Love doing them.
Yeah.
Always open our doors for that. But if you want to do a worship service in our building, I need to ask permission from our Archbishop.
Would that be the same for schools?
Yeah. But there's an occasional but.
There's always a but.
There's always a but, and again, part of our role is to agitate, to say,
the reason why I'm asking is because I'm going to be audacious here to say that similar to you, I think I'm an agitator.
Yeah.
And obviously, I haven't done 10% of what you have done in ministry. So this is a very arrogant thing to say right now. But I feel like if we can stir that pot a little bit, there might be other denominations who would benefit exponentially of the real estate powerhouse that the Anglican Church is, and before the building turns into a pub, should turn into another church. But again, I'm not trying to put you in any difficult position.
And I think where we've been able to get some momentum in the past is particularly with ethnic churches coming in from other cultures. So if you've got a Brazilian church and there's no Brazil, and normally there's a couple of boxes you need to tick. Is there another church of that style in the geographic region? And if the answer is no, then there's more of a chance that our hierarchy might look at that. I know a number of Anglican churches that have got Asian language churches, that are not Anglican worshipping and using their buildings.
I can see why.
Yeah.
I can see why.
And in saying that, I think part of the answer is church growth and church planning in the Anglican context.
Yeah.
But part of the answer is also us humbling ourselves and saying, we're not the church we think we are.
Well,
we don't own the right
Yeah.
to have that building sitting idle for 90% of the time and it not being used for the glory of God.
Because I'm not an Anglican, I can say this. I was going to say, well, of course, every human being with any level of power would have an ego to say, before denomination X does this, we would like to do it ourselves.
Yep.
Which is, I don't think it's a bad thing, but we are coming to a point in time where you realize, you know what, these guys are doing faster than us. We need to help out.
Absolutely.
Which is great. I love the fact that you're an agitator and you sit in that role and you've agitated the waters for longer than I have. So I've got hope.
Yeah.
I've got hope. Now, another thing that I've been recommended to ask you is about friendships in ministry. I haven't been around as much as you have, and I'm only new to this thing. I don't have that much experience, but every single person I talk to, there's no exception to this rule. Every minister I talk to, they point to one problem in common: lack of real friends. Friendships are shallow, ministry is lonely, all of those excuses. I tend to believe it doesn't have to be that way, and I push myself to not be that way. But I keep finding resistance. Even with the people who want to fight against that idea, they isolate themselves and they're not really genuine in their friendships. So what would you say about that? Let's talk about that. Like that, it's not a question, it's just an observation.
That's such a good area to talk about. And please, in my response, don't hear me think that I've got this worked out. I struggle with this like every pastor. And there's been seasons in my life where I've done better than I have, and there's seasons where I've really struggled and I've been at that sort of despair of loneliness. Fortunately, I'm best friends with my wife, and I would encourage, for those in church leadership where you are blessed with a spouse, you need to invest in that relationship.
Wow.
Spend time, let that person be your best friend as well as your lover, and be your prayer partner, be your confidant as much as possible without it sort of eroding your relationship. Yeah, there's got to be an element of compartmentalization in that. But also, don't let them be everything. You can't let the person that you love the most carry all your burdens. You have to share with each other. And you also need to know yourself outside of that relationship. So as much as I love my wife, I need time with other people and time by myself to be a better husband. So I can't be the best husband I possibly can be to Leanne, which I'm still working out after 27 years of marriage, how to be the best husband I can be. If I don't spend time getting my head together privately, praying fervently to God privately, so I can pray with her, but also building relationships with others. We went through some pretty big stuff when I was in my first church, where as our church was growing, a lot of our friends started coming. And there was an issue within that church that didn't involve me, but I pastored it. And that sort of changed my position in the relationship to being not just my mate Stu, but also my pastor. And I came to realize that it's really hard to be a friend and a pastor at the same time. And it's not impossible, but you need to be aware that you actually carry that role of shepherd for your friend. Even if you were a friend before you were a pastor, when they come to your church then you need to be aware that they will see you differently, even though you might see yourself still as that friend before you were their pastor. So I think an awareness of that is really helpful, that you don't try and be something you're not, because you are a pastor. You are a shepherd.
Should we try to avoid that?
No, I don't think we try and avoid that, but you just need to have self-awareness that I am both pastor and a friend. But that means that I can't come to you if you're in my church and complain about my church board. You're the wrong person to talk about. Like, I can't tell you that I've had a really hard day working with a team member, or there's been a real issue with a family in the church and I'm really struggling with that. I need to have other mechanisms to do that. Sometimes that's your wife or husband if you're in ministry. But again, I can't lay on Leanne all the burdens that I'm covering. So I need to have friends within the church, friends who are my spouse. My spouse is my best friend, so I need that. I need to invest in that. And I'm going to give you two other areas of friendship. But did you want to ask me a question based on?
No, I think you're going there. That's exactly where I was going.
Yeah, so I'm still really good friends with my schoolmates. They knew me before I was a priest. Last week I went down to check out a church in Sydney. It's doing amazing things. Part of my time there, I caught up with one of my schoolmates who's the on-air producer for the morning breakfast show Sunrise. We caught up for coffee. He knows too much information about me, but we're real together.
That's the guy we need to contact if we want any leaking information.
That's right, okay. Absolutely, yeah. I've got contacts. But he was also the guy that was least surprised when I told him that I was going to become a priest. I've got friends that have known me since I was 15, 16 years old that I'm still really good friends with. So I need to invest in those relationships outside the church. I've baptised some of their kids, which has been an amazing honour. One of my schoolmates, I did his wedding, which that just brought joy to my heart. So I would encourage pastors to have church friends church friends who you pastor, but know your boundaries. But also have friends who aren't in the church. I've played sport my whole life. My cricket team in Newcastle used to call me Rabbi. That was there. Everybody in Australia gives people nicknames. Yeah. That having good friendships in areas of life outside the church, whether they be school friends, sporting friends, people in interest groups outside the church, you've got to have those. But the big area I'm going to challenge the pastors that are leading in the city that are listening to this podcast, be friends with each other. There is nobody in the world that knows what leading a church is like other than church leaders. Become friends with each other. It's easy to see ourselves as in competition. I think it's harder to see ourselves as friends.
How do we make that friendship real? Because the reason why I'm asking this question, this is a struggle of mine. Confession moments. I come from a different culture where everyone is friends instantly. I recently heard this somewhere and I repeated it on the sermon. Here in Australia, we're really good at being friendly, but we're better being friends. And for me, the concept of friendship is what Jesus presents, it's someone who will lay down your life. I literally have friends from when I was 16. I've got one particular friend who actually jumped in front of a bullet for me. He could have died. So that's a friend. Anything else? It's a secondary category. And then you mentioned, I understand being best friends with your wife. Great. I 100% agree. I understand the boundaries, even though internally I'm fighting. Maybe it's the rebel in me, but why can I not be real friends with people in the church and actually vent and complain about my board? Like that's, I'm fighting, and you know my board, so I'm like, and they know I'm probably saying this on purpose. But I get it. I get what you're saying.
Yeah.
I understand being friends with people outside of your church, because then you can talk about things that may implicate you somewhere else, but you can just be normal. You can watch a game and you can let something go. I don't know if this is where you're going, but the last part of what you said, being friends with other pastors in the city. Gotta be really honest with you, Stu. Where I come from in Brazil, and what I've seen in other parts of the world, and maybe I haven't seen enough. I'm only 42. But for me, that's an illusion. I've never seen people doing that for real. Like, how many times have the other pastors in town here been at your house, being real, eating something, and just being real, either crying or laughing?
Yeah. I think part of the Australian culture that you're probably speaking to is that we measure friendship by the numbers of friends that you have, not the depth of relationship of friendship that you have. And so I think my response to your question is, yeah, I'm not very good at it. I try though. And where I'm bad at it is where I try to count the numbers. How many pastors do I have in my phone that I could just call and say, hey, how you going? Do you want to catch up for a coffee? I've got lots who could do that. But how many pastors could I call and say, I'm going through a crisis right now. I need your help. I've actually got a few. And that's actually enough. You just need a few that you could go really deep with and really hard with, be really vulnerable and honest with. And you don't need 20 or 30 that you can go really deep with. I'd like to think that there's probably 20 or 30 people that in time that we might develop that type of relationship with, but to have 2 or 3, I mean, God doesn't grow the churches in 20s and 30s. God grows the churches in 2s and 3s. Wherever 2 or 3 are gathered, there am I in your midst. You just need 2 or 3 people that you can be real with and open with. And I guess it's a challenge that I often say to myself, have I got 2 or 3? Because it's part of accountability. If you don't have 2 or 3 people that you can be real with, you're not being real with yourself.
Yeah, you're in trouble.
And we've seen churches all over the world crumble apart. I've seen it in my own denomination. When you pull back the layers, they've been lying to themselves.
Yeah.
So who is going to sit alongside you and call you out?
Yeah.
Earlier this week, I played golf with a pastor who I feel like I can be real with. He can be real with me. He's a lot younger than I am. I'm a slightly better golfer than he is.
If he's watching, he's going to be okay. Revenge.
But over the years, we've worked on this, and we've got a long way to go. Like, I haven't invited him and his family to our home yet, but that's a challenge for me to actually go and ring him up and say, hey, come around to our place for dinner. But we're building that relationship. Yeah. Has it got work to go? Absolutely. But we're building a groundwork where if we need to, I can ring him up and say, hey, mate, have you got some time? Can I be real with you? I know Marsh and Dan. They're guys I know I can ring up and say, hey, guys, have you got a moment? Can I be real with you? And they would drop everything, because I would do that for them. Yeah, when Dan's son had the motorbike accident, I felt privileged that he included me as part of the prayer network to lift up Joel. Yeah. So being there in your darkest moments, that's when it matters.
Now, let me go one step further with it, and then I can ask you the last question that we asked you every guest in the podcast. But my question is how? How do you do friendships for real with those 2 or 3 guys that you have? Because you mentioned I can call them, I can be real, and I'm not trying to interpret your words without context. I'm just literally verbalizing what I hear. You pointed to the fact that you can call them, you can be real, you can be vulnerable. It's a phone interaction. Maybe they will give you time. Maybe they will come and help in doing what you're doing. But how do you do life with them? Do they come to your house? How often that happens?
You've got to put yourself out there. You've got to be vulnerable. You've got to be real and authentic. And it just doesn't happen overnight. It's sort of like take yourself back to when you're in primary school and I take myself back to when I was in primary school. My sister was different. Like she was wired differently to me. We'd moved town. First day at a new school, she's come back home. She's got 3 new best friends.
Yeah, I was going to say that. My daughters do that.
Yeah.
Like, to take yourself back to high school, they do that.
But I didn't do that. I would spend the first few weeks eating lunch by myself. I've got to put myself in a vulnerable position to say, actually, it's got to cost me something. I've got to mark out time in my diary there'd have to be something really, really, really urgent in my local church for me to say no to an opportunity to gather together and pray with other pastors. I've prioritized that as one of the things that we've got a unity movement meeting, an event, a prayer opportunity, praying alongside another pastor. Somebody's new to the area. They ring me up and, hey, can I take you for a coffee? Or I ring them and say, can you come for a coffee? Doesn't mean we're going to be best friends overnight.
Yeah.
But you're putting yourself out there enough. And eventually there's going to be somebody that you go, hey, you play golf as well? Let's play golf. Or you find something in common. It's good to do that with couples. If you're married, invite them for dinner. We have people around to our place for dinner from time to time who are pastors. Build connections that way. We've been privileged to be invited into other people's homes. Say yes to those opportunities and put yourself in a position where you should be able to say, well, at least I've met you before at a church unity event and we've had a conversation. Yeah. Maybe not a deep one, but we can go deeper today because we've met before and this is not our first conversation. It's like that. There's a hair product commercial in Australia that was around when I was younger. Pantene, it won't happen overnight, but it will happen.
That's good.
You just have to keep putting yourself out there.
I like that.
Like you're in primary school, high school. Make yourself known. People didn't like Jesus straight away.
Yeah.
Not everybody was a disciple of the 12, but he kept putting himself out and out there in uncomfortable situations. He didn't run away from the uncomfortable, and neither should we as pastors.
Yeah.
We've got to make ourselves uncomfortable. Part of being uncomfortable makes yourself vulnerable. I think vulnerability is healthy.
Yeah.
Too many of us as pastors want to put that exterior that we've got it together, like we've got all the answers. I want to be known as the pastor on the Gold Coast that has the least amount of answers. Because I want to learn from you.
Perhaps the most amount of questions.
Hallelujah. Yeah. And I think that's attractive to those outside the church.
Nice.
If we haven't got it all together, I haven't got it all together either. Hey, we've got something in common.
That's good.
Maybe we can lead you to somebody who's got the answers.
I appreciate you being vulnerable and not that I needed you to agree with the fact that we do friendships badly, but it is a testament of the veracity of the problem. We all face the same problem. And having the guy that everyone looks up to, like yourself, saying, hey, I struggle with that too. And maybe it's a reminder to call their friend and say, hey, come to my house. You haven't done that yet. I could almost say it's an honor to have someone that have done what you've done, represent what you represent, to say, okay, you're on the money, Pedro. We have a problem there. Houston, we have a problem.
We do have a problem. and it can be a lonely life, being a pastor of a church. The first thing we need to do is admit that we're lonely. And we don't do well if we're pretending. I think the generation that God's calling us to reach are really good at detecting if we're not real and authentic. So let's be real with ourselves first.
They are really good.
Yeah.
They are really good. Well, I'm not 100% aware of the scope of my reach. Again, too arrogant, only 42, haven't done this for long enough. And this is not a false humility. More and more I'm seeing, man, there's so much that I haven't even learned about the culture here. The way people behave, the way people talk, they form friendships. But I do feel like outside of what I call my main mission, I love the preaching of the word. I love the church, developing the church. But outside of that, if it is up to me, and if the Lord is graceful enough to keep me in the city for the next 20 years, I would love to reverse the idea of this being a cemetery for preachers and pastors, and this would be a playground. You know,
this is an incubator. This is childcare for pastors.
Yeah. Like, I like the idea of a headquarter, but that's too military for the Gold Coast. We don't have a military base in the Gold Coast, so. But a good playground where people actually enjoy ministry. The whole idea of ministry stuff, ministry is that. Why? Let's just enjoy it. Man, we're saving lives.
Absolutely.
We're bringing people to heaven. Yeah. So this should be, anyway, I can talk about that all the time. But
me too, buddy.
Let me ask you that last question. And a preface to this question. Because you are so involved, because you know, I mean, you probably have the mayor's number on your phone. So I understand that what you say here could bring some implications, but as best as you can, I would love for you to answer this question as purely of heart as you can.
Yep.
Even if it causes you a little bit of trouble. Not too much, but a little bit of trouble. In your perspective, sitting where you sit from an Anglican church, unity in the city, being involved, being in ministry for that many years, for that long, what do you think that the city of the Gold Coast needs?
Needs from the church?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think the best thing that the church can gift to the city is a humble heart. I think, bouncing off what we've just been talking about, the city and those in the city who don't know Jesus, the last thing they need is an arrogant church who think they have the answers for how they should be living their life. Because if we posture ourselves that way, they're just going to ignore us, and right, because they already think that's what we're like. If they can see the church of the city of the Gold Coast, and I say the big C church, every denomination, every flavour, humble and vulnerable enough to say, hey, like, we're a church, but we might not be the right church for you. But if we're not, I know some other great churches that I reckon you'd fit perfectly in. If we can cheer each other on. The interesting thing is that the world outside the church, they don't know that we've got differences. And if we can't cheer each other on, how can we offer them something beautifully compelling? The church has to be beautifully compelling. That aroma of Christ has to, that beautiful expression that the sheep smell like the shepherd. And we need to smell like Jesus. And to do that, we've got to humble ourselves. I went to a Hillsong conference years ago. I'm pretty sure it was either Matt Redman or Tim Hughes who said these words: either you humble yourself before God or God will humble you before himself. Either way, you'll end up humble. It's just a lot easier if you humble yourself.
Yeah.
I think we've got an opportunity in this city for the church to humble itself. And humble itself together. Not to say my church is better than your church. Not to poke fun at the church down the road who's going through issues. Because we're all going through issues. If we can present to the church on the Gold Coast that we're each other's cheerleaders, that we love each other. How can we love those outside the church if we don't love ourselves? Christians should be able to love each other as Christians, regardless of whether you go to my church or not. I should be able to love you because you go to another church. And if the first thing that we say to somebody walking through the door is, we've got the answers, but the church down the road doesn't, we've lost the plot.
Yeah.
The best thing that we can offer is a humble spirit that says, we're in this together. If you come to my church, hallelujah. If you go to the church down the road, hallelujah. We just want you to know Jesus.
Amen.
If the church down the road grows and our church stays the same or declines, as long as the kingdom is growing, Jesus is glorified. I'm doing my job.
Nice.
If I can meet people who don't know Jesus and say, I'm sorry, but I don't really think that our church is ready to disciple you, but man, I know a church that it's just right for you.
Yeah.
Can I introduce you to somebody else? But sometimes we've got so much pride that says, I know we could do it ourselves. No. We've got to take that, what you talked about, the buildings. That's got to be our hearts. Our hearts can't be so proud that we think that we could disciple everybody.
Yeah.
We can't lead everybody to our denomination or our little church. It's not about creating empires. It's about creating disciples.
Nice.
And I can't do that alone in an Anglican church in Robina. I need the Uniting Church down the road. I need the Pentecostal church down the road. I need the Catholic church down the road. I need the Independent church down the road. I need the Lutheran church up the road. We need it all together. So the best gift that we can give to the city is a humble church.
Nice.
And I think that that's different. You talked earlier about the culture of the body on the Gold Coast. One of the things I learned, I went over to the UK earlier this year and went to the Alpha Leadership Conference. Tim Hughes, who's the worship leader, has got a brother, Pete Hughes, who runs a church in King's Cross in London. And he spoke and he said, he used these words, secularism, I got that word out, secularism has crumbled and young people have feasted on its narrative and now they're sick. The church has got the answer to that.
Yeah.
And so these people who are in the gyms that I go to, who are taking selfies, that are trying to look the best, are starting to realise that's not all it's cracked up to be. And they're looking for something deeper. We're the answer.
Yeah.
But we're not the answer if we say, oh, you've got to look like an Anglican and then you'll be perfect. No, you just got to look to Jesus. That's your answer.
Nice.
And churches that point to Jesus, churches that point to other churches that are pointing to Jesus, that's the gift to the city. Because we do have the answer that they're looking for.
Yeah.
But the answer is not make them all my tribe, make them all Christians. That they know
That's beautiful.
Jesus.
That's beautiful. Recently, we had a guy sitting here with us, and he said, I've resigned from my ministry, and I signed up with Jesus' ministry.
Yeah.
So that summarizes it.
Yeah, I think if as church leaders, if we can't all say that, we need to start looking at ourselves.
That's a challenge.
It is, yeah.
It's a challenge ahead of us, but I'm glad this
Christian
is
first.
happening. Yeah.
Jesus follower first, Anglican second.
Yeah.
It's got to be every
Amen.
time.
That's good, man. That's good. Man, I really appreciate your time. I don't want to keep you for much longer, but we do. I do feel like we can do like part 3, part 4, part 5 of this because you have a lot to share. I really appreciate you making the time coming here.
I'm being humbled by your kind words. It is humbling, and I think, I don't take those words lightly. I feel privileged to have had some positions of influence in the city, the ears of some important people. It'll be somebody else's turn to have that in the next season. But I just pray that I can be faithful and I can be a friend to another pastor.
Yeah.
And a husband to my wife, a father to my kids, and a shepherd to my church.
You're certainly being a voice to a lot of us. That's true. And we, at the end of the year, as we record this, but as soon as the year turns around, I promise I'll come around, Rubin. I'll take you out for coffee. Let's work on that. Let's put it to practice.
Absolutely.
Let's work on that. I'll bring Jordan with us, and then we have some more nice conversations over coffee.
Love it.
All right, awesome, brother. Thank you very much for being here. Appreciate you, man. That's awesome. Oh.